Nostalgia is a very powerful thing. Long before PlayStation controllers had analogs, wide-eyed younger versions of ourselves were baying for video games. It was a different time back then, and most of your early experiences were out of your hands, as the games on the console box were the only hope of future fun to be had. And just as white vans prowled the neighbourhoods with promises of puppies in their bowels, we were once again at the kindness and affluence of our friends' parents' wallets. Here are 5 games I loved, but never owned. There never was a more sacred delivery system for this digital ambrosia than demo discs. Now almost forgotten and left by the wayside, before live services and payment schemes destroyed video games, demo discs thrived in delivering bite-sized chunks of all the upcoming games. Short, plentiful, and infinitely replayable, this medium gave me my first look at Destruction Derby. Not one to shy away from races in my earlier years, Destruction Derby had colourful cars, elaborate marquees, and all of this parachuted into obscurity as the group of cars pitted in a circular arena blazed directly forward into multi-pointed head-on collisions. Sparks flew, paint shredded, and angled particulate swarmed in polygonal flurries. It made for a high-octane cocktail of ruination, where many cars enter and one car leaves. I will never forget the constant restarts as each engine eventually fell silent, coiled in black smog of war, and nothing but abstract PlayStation fragments strewn around remained. Over at my childhood friend's house, there was a PlayStation case that immediately drew the eye. A blood-brushed typography branded on a muscled oddball wearing a strange mask and clutching a submachine gun. That case was awesome, and that game was Loaded. Set in a futuristic prison, Loaded is a top-down twin-stick shooter made before analogs were even standardized. Filled with violence and mayhem, you shoot and bomb your way through a handful of levels riven with mobs of psychos, drug addicts, and security. Just like the undesirables trying to take your life, you also get to select your eclectic murderer, and Loaded was filled with very cool and very strange designs. My brain will never let me forget how cool the robot pirate guy was, and his unusual design was the beginning of my love for flintlock pistols. Years later, I would acquire Reloaded for myself on my brand new PC. But the original warms my memory, every so many years, and it's always bittersweet being absent from my collection. Who would have ever known at the time? All these years later, I will be mentioning my friend Mark and his awesome family this much in my PlayStation memories. International Track and Field is another of those great memories. Competing in all the Olympic events you can think of, the game tasked you with a range of certain mechanical requirements in order to achieve their set goals, ranging from timed button presses, button sequences, and of course, lots of button mashing. Over at my friend's house one day, we were met with the spectacle of 2 grown men, hunched over classic PS1 controllers, mashing the living hell out of their face buttons, as the man made of polygons belted towards a finishing line. The vexing detail left intentionally vague here was the method they applied. Clutching the controller with their left hands, thumb anchored just below the X button, and index finger hooked just above the circle button. Their right hand was free, and they held a cigarette lighter with a flat side grazing the buttons. With furious tempo, they scraped the blunt edge between their fingers repeatedly back and forth. I'll never forget the noise and the blur of plastics. And thus, the competitive world record chasing of International Track and Field began. And what an awesome time it was. I'm sure you guys may have a similar story of using socks, pens, hell, I've heard it all. But I think we can all come together with the competitive flame of International Track and Field as we try not to remember all the controllers we destroyed. At this point, you could build a house with the friends I was privileged enough to meet and enabled me to play amazing video games. And this next entry invokes another cherished companion, but one from much later. We trade watching Dragon Ball Z Air for the first time on Toonami, to high school blazers with a Yu-Gi-Oh deck in your side pocket, and that game in question is Legend of Dragoon. I was late to PS1, and PS1 RPGs in general, but after Final Fantasy VII made me a man, I had an unquenchable thirst for more. Fervently seeking any and all JRPGs, wherever they may be, and this one landed in my hands and stole a whole summer. I don't remember too many specifics of Dart's journey, as it's been 20 years since I last played it. I'm going to change that soon. But the combat, the music, the graphics, chasing that Platinum Shadow, getting lost in that dungeon where you have to legislate laws at a time where I couldn't even spell legislation, is a special stretch that will never be forgotten. The final installment of games I love yet never owned is SpiderMan. Prior to the Renaissance period of video game poverty known as chipped PlayStations, my only experience with web slinging was Maximum Carnage, a Mega Drive game that looked so awesome but was so difficult. You were practically fresh meat in the prison of poor choice blockbuster rentals. Spider-Man on the PS1 brought back that trauma, but it washed it away, and it did so with jubilation. The music, the visuals, the swinging, the bosses, a complete package of great ideas and great execution for the time. The frontier of experimentation present on PlayStation in those days was always exciting, and it's games like Spider-Man that made it such a joy to experience. Every game, in spite of limitations, brought something new. Good, bad, it really didn't matter, as the hunger and the passion shone through those faults and fractures. There are lots of games that cross our paths, but never grace our homesteads. It doesn't mean they aren't special, and that the love we carry for them is not a burden we pay gladly, eternally.